There's a ton to unpack in today's housing market. This is your official housing market for June 2022. This video is going to be long. So for all of the real estate agents who have short attention spans, lack of focus, don't have any discipline, just head over to Instagram, go to TikTok. There's a bunch of short little 10-second things so you can get your dopamine quickly. This is for all of the real estate agents that really want to learn and understand and be the student of the game so that we can communicate with our buyers and sellers in a much better way that positions us as the expert. So let's get right into it because there is so much to cover. It is going to be a long video. And because of your feedback, I'm going to be doing these every single month so that you can go into your market, communicate this to your buyers and sellers, and you can be the absolute expert. Let's jump in. So a lot of the things I get my sources from is from our friends over at MBS Highway. And so let's jump into the update. So here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to walk you guys through first inflation and mortgage rates, the impact that's having on the housing market. Number two, how the mainstream media is hurting your consumers. And I'm going to show you why. Number three, the real story of rising inventory, which is what everyone's talking about. The market is shifting, but we're going to really give you context today. Number four, I'm going to give you my housing forecast as we move forward into Q3. I'll give you some practical takeaways, and so let's get started. So I cannot believe that 2022 is already halfway over, okay? So hopefully you guys are on track with your goals. If you're not, it's a great time to reset because the work you're doing now is going to set you up for having either a great Christmas or one that you have regrets. So first and foremost, I want you guys to understand, I'm going to give you just a little bit of some economics 101. Not that you don't understand this, but the way in which, when I looked at this for myself, it helped me to understand this better, helped me to communicate this better. So I made this dumb little image on Canva, hoping that giving you guys a visual makes it easier for you to comprehend so that we can communicate it more clearly with our buyers and sellers. All right. So let's look at how inflation drives mortgage interest rates. Big takeaway from today's update. So here's what happened in 2020 to 2022. We had the pandemic we all know about for the last 2 years. We've been fighting this thing. Then the Federal Reserve says, okay, we got to make sure that this economy continues to move forward. So let's just give out a bunch of money to keep the economy moving forward. And in addition to that, let's just drop interest rates to pretty much 0%, making it easier for people to access money. Well, what did that do? That then increased demand like crazy. People got money cheap for next to nothing. The government was giving money to everybody. And so demand shot up like crazy. Everybody had a bunch of money to spend, and everybody was spending it, which was designed and executed perfectly, in my opinion, from the standpoint of keeping the economy pushing through the pandemic. Because there are a lot of people, myself included, was like, dude, are we just going to have a huge economic collapse because everything shut down? Well, we got through that. There's some implications of that, which we're going to get in today's video. So then what happened was supply it's not like everything just disappeared off the face of the earth. No, what happened was demand got so high that the supply couldn't keep up, which forced them to raise prices to try and keep up with demand. Now, in 2022, there's something called demand destruction. This is a strategy used by the Federal Reserve to fight inflation, okay? So let's talk about what is happening in 2022 right now at the end of Q2 as we get into Q3. Because prices and inflation are at record highs, the Federal Reserve, to fight inflation, says, okay, So we did the inverse of that. We gave everything away. We lowered interest rates to keep spending happening. Now we have to do the exact opposite. So we have to raise interest rates, okay, so that we can lower demand, so that supply and demand are now equal, which will hopefully drive the prices and inflation down, all right? That's just a little 101. We're going to unpack that in much more detail. So what is the effect that inflation has on mortgage interest rates? Because we're here in the context that we're talking about in today's update around how this has an effect on the housing market. So you can look at this, okay? This is going back to 1972. The blue line is inflation, and the light blue line is the 30-year mortgage interest rates. So what happens is, if you go back all the way to 1972, inflation goes up first, then mortgage interest rates follow. And this has been happening over the course of decades, okay? So there is no surprise that as inflation has been increasing in 2022, naturally, mortgage rates follow. That is another key takeaway for you so that you can understand the correlation between inflation and mortgage interest rates. Now let's look at a pattern. If we look back in history on what the Fed has done to combat this, all right? So if we go back in time and we say, okay, who is in the Fed chair? Okay, and we go way, way, way back in time, we can see, okay, when inflation was 7 to 14%, mortgage rates went from 12% to 18%. Then the Fed funds rate, you can see here on screen, they took that to combat that, right? This is their tool to fight inflation. They said, okay, we've got to stop this spending. Spending's getting out of control. Things are getting too expensive because the demand, we're rising demand, supply can't keep up. So they took the Fed funds rate from 11% to 20%. Inflation, listen, went down from 14 to 5%, and mortgage interest rates followed. They dropped from 18%, and they went down to 12%. The consequences of this was a recession. That's okay. Don't get scared. We're going to talk about this and how this plays out. Then Alan Greenspan takes over. Okay, inflation, 1.75% goes up to 3.5%. Mortgage rates go from 7% up to 8.5%. Why? Mortgage rates follow inflation. Fed funds rate. So Greenspan says, okay, I have to fight inflation. What do we have to do? We have to raise the Fed funds rate to slow down spending so that supply can keep up with catch up with demand. As a result, inflation drops from 3.5% back down to 1%. This is all the strategy the Fed uses. Then mortgage rates do the same thing. 8.5%, they drop to 5.5%. What followed? Another recession. Now, Jerome Powell is now the Fed chair. So when he took over, we are at 1.5% inflation. Now inflation is at 8.5%. Mortgage interest rates follow. They went from 2.5%, now at 5.5%, sometimes even higher. What does the Fed have to do? Oh, that's right. They have to raise the Fed funds rate from 0% during the pandemic to keep the economy moving forward, remember? And now they raise that to 3% in 2022, probably going to raise it again, okay? Inflation should drop. Just like it has done historically, inflation should come down. As a result, mortgage interest rates should also follow, okay? I'm going to talk about when you can expect that to happen or when it's likely for that to happen, which, as a result, it's likely that we're heading towards another recession. So let's keep on going. So let's talk about the chance of a recession. So historically speaking, when we look back over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, anytime unemployment was under 4%, there was a 42% chance, the likelihood of us having a recession. Anytime inflation was greater than 5%, the likelihood of a recession was 45%. Now, When you add the two, when unemployment rate is under 4%, like we have now, and inflation is greater than 5%, like we have now, historically speaking, there was a 100% chance that there was going to be, or that there was a recession. This is why we say it's likely that we're heading towards a recession, because unemployment rate right now hovering around that 4%, inflation is greater than 5%. It's likely that we're heading towards a recession. This is why. We could just look back in history, and these are the facts. So what does that mean? A recession will equal, it's likely that a recession will help to lower mortgage interest rates. Okay? Hopefully you're with me so far. If you have questions, certainly you can use the comments. We can go back and forth, because I want you to get the most from today's video so you can explain it to your buyers and sellers. So the mainstream media is confusing the consumer. They're all doom and gloom. I've been talking about this on these market updates literally for years, and it's getting worse. And let me give you an example, all right? So here are the facts. The facts are this, okay? I don't care what the media is saying, because the media is selling advertising. So of course they have to sell doom and gloom so that they get the eyeballs, so they can get more advertisers, so they can generate more revenue. Hopefully you guys understand how that works. So here are the facts. The housing market, traditionally speaking, well, if you go back, all the way to 1980, you could see on the screen that in the blue line are recessions. And then what happened to home prices after that recession is that home prices went up. Same thing happened if you move along in time. You can really look at this. So you got 1960, right? Then you can get to 70, 75, 1980. Every time there was a recession, 1990, recession, what happened? Home prices went up. 2001, mini recession, right? This was the dot-com whole bust thing. Home prices went up. Now, everyone in the media especially has a field day around the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. We have to understand that the cause of the recession in this one case was the housing market. If you look historically, if you go back in time, the housing market was not the cause of the recession, which historically speaking, when there was an economic recession, housing did just fine. Those are the facts. There was one occurrence, okay, in 2007, 2008, 2009, because when prices went down, because we had too much inventory and too less demand. In addition to that, we had obviously the craziest loans of all time that we've ever seen in the history of this country. No income, no assets. You didn't even have to have a job and you could get money. Well, obviously that wasn't great for the housing market. And the housing market at that time was the culprit, which drove the recession, which drove home prices down, because like we talked about at the beginning of the video, simple economics says it's simply a supply and demand issue. So at that point in time, the supply of homes was super high and the demand was very, very low, dropping prices. But if you look at the last recession we just had, the mini one, as a result of the pandemic, it was not a housing-induced recession. What did home prices do in the last year? Oh, that's right. In most cases, double-digit increases, almost 20% home appreciation, massive home growth, probably the greatest growth in a 1 or 2 year span after a recession that this country, looking back, has ever seen. So don't let the media confuse you. Certainly don't let the media confuse your buyers and sellers. Here's what the media is saying, all right? So if you look back and if you look at just CNBC as an example, and this is a great screenshot from one of the presentations that Barry Habib did on MBS Highway. I just loved it so much because, oh boy, was the media wrong. And had you been influenced by this, you would have been giving the wrong advice to your buyers and sellers, which would have came back on you. And so this is where we have to keep things in perspective. and be the expert. So look at the screen right now. In October of 2015, CNBC comes out and says, hey, housing today, a bubble larger than 2006. Okay, and they were putting fear into the marketplace in 2015. Well, had you listened to that, or had your buyers and sellers listened to that, homes that very next year went up by 5.1%. On a home price of $300,000, your home would have been worth $315,000. You would have lost out on that money had you listened to the media. August 2016, we're in a new housing bubble. Yet again, had you listened to that and not bought a home, you would have lost out on another 5.4% appreciation, or $17,000, which your home would have been worth $332,000 had you listened to the media. November 27, home ownership doesn't build wealth was the headline from CNBC, November 2017. Had you listened to that, you would have lost 6.1% appreciation, or $20,000 in wealth creation if you listened to that advice. Quite frankly, furthermore, on that one point, there is no better investment than a primary residence. And I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I just want to give you this one thing to think about. If you put 10% down on a property, on a $300,000 home, that's $30,000, right? Well, just in the last year of no fault of your own, and it went up 20%, and you say, okay, well, my cash outlay was $30,000. I bought this house for $30,000. The only cash outlay was $30K. Now that property went up that property went up 20%, $60,000. I just doubled my money in 1 year. I don't know if there's another investment out there that you can do that. All right, I digress. 2019, or I'll go 2018. It's better to rent than to buy in today's housing market. Oh, more bad advice from the media, because had you listened to that, you would have missed out on another 4.1% appreciation. July 2019, the housing market is about to shift in a bad way for buyers. Well, had you listened to that and you didn't buy a home, you would have lost out on another 4% or another $15,000, and your house would be worth $382,000. December 2019. Next year will be hard on the housing market, especially in the big cities. Wrong again. One of the greatest appreciation years the country has ever seen, 16%, right? Had you listened to the media, you would have been wrong. And then last year, this very time, as I'm making this video for you guys, I'm shooting this on the 4th of July, 2022. July 2021, housing boom is over as new home sales fall to pandemic low. This was just last year, CNBC, scaring everybody. Wrong again. In the last 12 months, home appreciation, some of the greatest we've ever seen in this country's history, of 18% for home owners. You saw the greatest appreciation over the last 12 months than we've seen maybe ever. All right, so don't listen to the media. So let me give you a practical look at the impact all of this is having on houses, or housing prices in the market ahead. So again, housing economics, we've been talking a lot about it in today's video. All right, so let's just make sure that we're on the same page. High demand and low supply simply equals higher prices. Low demand and high supply of homes equals lower prices. So what does this mean? Demand and supply, when they're equal, equals sustained appreciation. So 2 to 3%, not 20%, not a huge, massive price drop like everyone's talking about. You know, are we in this huge, massive bubble like we saw in 2007, 2008? No. When demand and supply are equal, we see sustained appreciation of 2 to 3% per year. So let's just look at how we come up with demand. Rates on mortgages are irrelevant, and here's why. Housing demand, you can make the argument maybe that it's driven a little bit by rates, but when is the last time you heard a buyer say, I want to buy a house because of the mortgage interest rates? Never happened. People buy houses for reasons outside of what mortgage interest rates are. Now, I know a lot of you in the comments and a lot of the analyticals say, nope, that's just not true. I'm talking about the everyday home buyer, home seller. They're buying and selling homes because of something that is happening in their life. Yes, you can make the argument that investors or some people make a decision to do something based on what the rates are doing. Sure, I can buy into that. But on the spectrum of things, if we're saying the 80-20, it's probably like 95-5, 95% of people buy and sell real estate regardless of mortgage interest rates. What actually drives housing demand are household formations. So if you're looking at the screen, you can see that historically, if we look back over the last 10, 20, 30 years of time, the green line is average, okay? The average number of new households formed. So this is not somebody selling a house and buying a new house because there was no new inventory and there was no new demand. It was a wash, okay? This was a huge takeaway for me that I'm hoping you guys get from this. Housing demand, true demand, comes when there's a new household that's formed. So let me give you a practical example. A new couple who both spouses live at home with their parents, they get married and they say, we want to buy a home. That is a new household that gets formed. That is what we're talking about, okay? So right now, as we sit in this June of 2022, there's about 1.4 million new households being formed. If you look back over the 10, 20, 30 years, you can see, we're just above the average, all right? And this is where demand comes from. So let's look at the supply side of things. So we looked at demand, let's look at supply so you can understand this. The media wants you to believe that, like, look at all this supply coming in the market. We're in deep shit. Look at all the housing starts. And this was the last report that came out, but there's more coming soon. 1.7 million homes are being built. And here's the thing. Supply must come from new homes being built. Okay? I hear a lot of amateur or new real estate agents thinking that supply comes from people selling their homes. Well, if they sell their home and they buy the new home, the supply stayed the same, okay? I hope you get that. Supply comes from new homes being built. So housing starts 1.7 million. About, on average, there's 100,000 homes that are destroyed every year. So the new supply is 1.6 million. This is what the media wants you to believe. Okay, well, let's look at what's actually happening. So new housing demand. We have to look at, we talked about the new house, the new households being formed. 1.4 million, okay? And then there's a surplus, okay, of new homes, which I'm going to talk about. And so look at the housing starts completed. There's one thing for a home to start being built, but we all know it's taking these builders a year and a half to build these things. So we have to say how many houses are being completed. Well, that's about 1.3 million. There's 100,000 that get destroyed every year. So the new actual supply is 1.2 million. There's 1.4 million new households being formed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still in a deficit of 200,000 homes. This is not a surplus. We're still in a decline of inventory, okay? Hopefully you understand this. Furthermore, let's take a look at inventory. We are still at record lows. So all the people that say, oh my gosh, inventory is growing, this is just going to crush the market, Brandon, because you talk about supply and demand. Well, the supply is going way up. Demand's going way down because interest rates are hold on, I'll get to it. Just let me walk you through this. So let's look at the actual housing bubble. When the housing market was the cause of the recession, and there was an actual, in fact, housing bubble, look at inventory and where this was at in 2007. 3.8 million homes in inventory. Well, right now, like we said, there's there's just over 1 million houses out there. And that's not even the whole story, because we're going to talk about, of the 1 million, there aren't 1 million homes actively for sale, because we have to take into consideration actives and pendings, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So historically speaking, why the housing market, or why we're not in a bubble, remember the economics 101, so I started this video off like that. it's all based on supply and demand. Okay, so when we have the supply still at record lows and demand being higher than the amount of homes being built, because there are 1.4 million new households being formed, regardless of interest rates. You see, most people are thinking interest rates is killing the demand. No, it's probably, it's not helping, but it's not killing it either. Okay, so let's look at the whole thought around, well, inventory is growing. Yeah, active listings, the number of active listings is growing, okay? Well, that's not the whole story. There's about a little over 600,000 homes that came in the marketplace in June, like they always do. Look at 2017, 2018, 2019, so on and so forth. Why does inventory grow over the spring and summer? Well, it's because, as you know, people move before school starts. So in order to close by August or September, well, really August, so the kids can start in the new school, because let's face it, parents don't want their kids to be moving during the school year. That is why new listings go up during spring and summer months and come down over the fall and the winter. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, it is no more complicated than that. So when you see, oh my gosh, look at all these new listings hitting the market, it's that, okay, time of year, right? And it's the sellers who have been sitting on the sideline seeing, okay, how high is my house going to be worth? Because look at the last 12 months, it went up by 18, 20% in most markets. So all of these people that have a new 20% of wealth, contrary to what the media says, now they're 20% wealthier because they waited for the last 12 months. Now, because they're being smart, they're saying, okay, things will probably level off. Now's the right time to sell. So timing around the time of year, and then timing around the market. So again, but they're like, Brandon, but inventory is growing. Right, we talked about this. Existing home inventory is about 1 million. However, there's 600,000 homes under contract, which means only 400,000 homes are actively for sale for the 1.4 million buyers out there looking for homes. Do you understand it now more clearly why we are not in a bubble? Because we have the demand for homes is still so much greater than the real supply. This is the real story the media is not sharing with you. There isn't 1 million homes for sale. There are 400,000 for sale, because we list 600,000 every single month or so, and then those go under contract. And what's left over of the million is about 400,000 left over. Okay, so we have to look at this historically. When we go back to 2017, active listings, this is the key piece here. Active listings, of the 2 million in inventory, there were 1.5 million homes actively for sale, meaning that they were accessible to buyers. They weren't under contract yet. And if you look at the number of households being formed, like we've been talking about in today's video, that starts to make more sense. Because on average, if we're creating about 1.3, 1.4 new households per year, and there's 1.5 million homes for sale, that's even. That's a neutral market. It's a very healthy market. Well, look at where we're at today. I just told you. There are only about 400,000 homes for sale, which is 40% off, essentially, market availability, meaning of the 1 million homes that we talk about in inventory that the media just loves to talk about, you guys, men and women, realtors, there's only 400,000 that are there for the buyers of the 1.4 buyers that are out there shopping for homes. Hopefully that part makes sense. Okay, and again, just to nail this point home, look at the screen, the number of households, just so you guys don't forget. Okay, we have back during that last housing bubble, we had about just over 1 million new households being created. How many homes did we have for sale? Go back, okay, about 3 million. 3 million homes for sale, 1 million buyers. Now, it's pretty much the opposite. We have, if you look at this, we have about 1.3 million buyers, and we only have about 400,000 homes for sale. It's statistically improbable, I would say, to see another housing bubble or a housing crash because of this. And I'm hoping you guys are understanding this. So we have almost 3 million fewer homes than we did back in 2007. So here's the housing forecast, all right? So first off, let's talk about prices. So if you look at the report, June 2022, home prices are arguably the highest they've ever been in history. All right. Average price about $450,000, up 17% year over year. I believe that the housing prices are going to start to level off. All right. They're not going to drop because of what we just talked about for the last 30 minutes. They're going to level off, which is very healthy. Okay. From an affordability standpoint and all the things we talked about in today's video, we believe that they are going to level off, not drop, level off. The number of newly listed homes, we talked about this a little bit, but it's because of the time of year and all of these sellers understanding that prices are going to level off, which is why you see the increase of 4.5% of new listings hitting the market year over year. Great. We need more listings because the buyer's saying there's not enough houses for sale. The media sees this and they create this crazy fear-based headline and gets all of your buyers and sellers and a lot of you realtors in a panic, okay? This is the facts. Active listing count, all right? This is what the whole video has been about, okay? So this is just what's available. This is what's available out there. Active listings, 600,000. This is what we have today, all right? Yeah, it's up 20% year over year because of what we talked about, all right? So there are more homes available. Still not even close to being enough, but there is a little bit more inventory for buyers. Pendings. Okay, pendings are down a little bit. So it's down 16%. So of the active, the 1.2 million, 1.3 million inventory, 585,000 of those are under contract, leaving the 600,000 for sale. Makes sense. You guys can do the math. We have 1.4 million buyers or so, give or take. Still a huge deficit. You have to put things in context. Days on market. Here is the point. If you're an agent that's been following me for a while, or you're one of my coaching clients, you understand how much I put into days on market as it relates to the real estate market, and here's why. Here's the real story, ladies and gentlemen. I don't care what new listings are doing or sales or inventory. Doesn't matter. The real story is how fast. This is the real picture into supply and demand. How fast are homes selling? Well, days on market, June 2022, putting everything else aside, is lower than it was before. Higher interest rates, more inventory. The days on market is still lower. And this is simply because of our current inventory deficit. So it does not matter. This is why we're protected against a bubble or home prices crashing like the media wants you to believe. Well, that's just not the real case when you look behind the curtains and look at the facts. Price reduction. This is another one. This is a key one, all right? So I want to spend a minute or two here. This is the one that the real estate agent community is really having a tough time with. They're like, Brandon, I hear you. All that makes sense. So you're really saying, hey, there's nothing really to be scared of. It's just the market neutralizing. But look at all the price reductions. I mean, we're up 7% year over year in June 2022, meaning more and more sellers are having to reduce their price. What's your take on that? Okay, here's why. It's because prices are leveling off, but the sellers still have the mindset of a market a year ago. So the expectation that they're making decisions off of when they're pressing you on higher price, and the actual market is leveling off, all that's actually happening is sellers are having to reduce their price to reflect the current market, which are great values, They're just not 20% increases like they thought they were last year. So this is now our opportunity to communicate this to the seller to say, well, we can't price like we were pricing last year. You're still going to get an amazing price for your home, but this is just a byproduct of sellers and agents operating from the market in 2021, thinking they can do the same thing when things are softening a bit and they're having to reduce the price to be more in line with the active market today. It isn't a sign of concern. It's a sign of setting better expectations with sellers and giving the sellers enough time to adjust to the current market, because they're still of the mindset of 20% increases. It's like the chicken or the egg, you know what I mean? You can't have it both ways. And so the reason why we see price reductions skyrocketing is because we got to get the sellers of the mindset like, listen, this isn't the market last year where you could just price it at whatever you want, get 47 offers. This isn't that. Okay, the market's softened a bit. There's a little bit more inventory, so we have to be a little bit smarter with our pricing. So these are just a byproduct of agents having the communication with the seller to say, hey, we have to adjust the price based on the market today. Practical takeaways. Number one, here's what I believe as a takeaway from this video. Inflation will continue to increase in Q3. We are all under the belief that once we get to fall or winter, that we will hopefully see inflation peak, but we still think that inflation is going to continue to go up. Number two, as a result, we believe that the Fed is most likely going to increase rates again in Q3. Now they have a July and a September meeting. We're going to see, but all signs lead us to believe that rates are going to go up because they have to fight inflation. Right? That's how they do it. That is the strategy. I gave you all of the historical data on that so you understand how that works. So if inflation goes up, the Fed has to increase those rates to fight inflation so that rates can come back down, slow down spending, which again will lead us into a recession so that we can keep the economy moving. Most likely, we are going to head into a recession. It's most likely. If history tells us, and it's always true, right? History tells us the future. Every time we've been in this situation in this country, with inflation being the way that it is and the Fed raising rates the way that they must to fight the inflation, a recession is not far behind. I don't want this to scare you. All that this means is the Fed is doing this on purpose strategically, okay? They raise the Fed funds rate to slow down spending so that supply can catch up to demand and prices of everything can come down. Isn't that what you all want? And so this doesn't mean home prices drop. We talked about this. Historically speaking, home prices actually appreciate 2, 3, 4% during a recession. Number four, home prices, like I've said many times in this video, will most likely level off, but they're not going to drop. It's not like we saw in 07, 08 because of all the reasons I gave you. Number five, we believe inventory will increase lightly, all right? It's going to increase a little bit to get us back to hopefully more of a neutral market where the amount of homes for sale is closer to the number of buyers, because right now that discrepancy, we're at such a deficit. Next, demand. We believe demand will drop slightly as a result of higher mortgage interest rates, okay? But it's still a lot higher, okay? So remember, demand doesn't all come from mortgage interest rates, but because of the higher interest rates, we'll see demand drop a little bit. But remember, there's still 1.4 million new homeowners coming into the marketplace, new households being formed. We don't have that many homes being built, so we're still at a deficit. We believe homes will still sell relatively quickly. We saw that the days on market is actually lower. That'll probably go up a little bit. We'll see homes probably not sell as fast as we have in the past, just because as a result of what we're seeing in the market. And sellers might only get 1 or 2 offers now instead of getting 5 or 6. It's okay. They're still going to get a great price for their home. It just might take a little bit longer with less offers. But how many offers do they need to sell the house? Oh, that's right, 1. It's our job as real estate professionals to communicate this with sellers. Next, sellers need to get their homes on the market right now, before August, while buyer demand stays high, before school starts. Okay, I told you why the market in spring of new listings and why transactions are so high during the summer. It's because mainly people are trying to transact while kids are out of school. Because we see every single year, I make a video on it every year, September is the slowest month of the year. It's when all the kids go back in school. All the buyers stop completely. So all of your sellers, the takeaway, the practical takeaway for you and your sellers is we must act now. It is July, the 4th of July. We've got to get the house on the market. We've got to get showings happening so we can accept an offer, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, go under contract, be closed in August for our greatest likelihood to sell the property. So that is your June 2022 housing market update. My hope is that you have great takeaways, that you learned a lot. Let me know what questions you have. And I'm planning on doing these every single month moving forward. I hope that this was of value. And if you got value, love to see you subscribe. If you stop getting value from my channel, you can always unsubscribe later. And I appreciate the time and attention today. I know it was a long one, but we'll see you guys in another video very soon. Thank you guys so much for watching.